Coming. So, hi everybody.
Hi.
I'm Patty.
Hello.
Hi,
Patty.
I'm a Freyjasgythja. That's pretty much the easiest way to start. After many, many years of working, my notebook may not stay open, so I may have to fuss with it.
I feel that some of these meetings should begin with, hi, my name is, I'm a Freyja's person.
I'm a Freyja's person. It is a little like that. Where I come from, I've been heathen, I've been pagan since I was like 21 years ago. Right? No, more, God. Sorry, I shouldn't swear on
I was going to say, you don't have to
possibly
date
being
yourself.
filmed. I'm 31 years ago. I drifted out of Catholicism and into paganism. I was just sort of a generic neo-pagan. I was never Wiccan or Telemite or any ADF or any specific brand. And I used Harner's core shamanic techniques as my spiritual method. It's not a religion, it's a method. So I used that as my primary method. And I started getting these weird images that I didn't understand. There was a spear, it was all carved. And it was sort of hanging in like just empty space, and it would just sort of turn really slowly. I didn't know what that was. And then there was this tree, and I actually have in my notebooks from '94 the word Yggdrasil, Y-G-D-R-A-Z-L. So I'm totally spelling it wrong. I was phonetically spelling it. And I was like, oh man, I'm really right. I really did have this that long ago. So I was getting this image of this world. I mean, I know what a world tree is, so it was a world tree. I got that part, but I wasn't really sure, you know, what the word was or where the word came from. And then there was this spirit teacher who was just, I can't say too much about it, but she was just radiantly beautiful, although I could hardly ever see her face because there was this bright shine right here. And I didn't know who she was. I mean, I knew she was someone that I worked with, but I didn't have a name. And I asked her one time if there was a name I should use to refer to her by, and she said, what you're doing is called Save, go find people who do it, and thrust me back into my body. So I said, okay, I have a word now, you know. And so I slowly sort of became heathen. I never ever professed. I never took an oath of profession saying, yes, I'm heathen and this is what I do. So I've been doing that since about 94, 95-ish, which again is a really long time ago. Now, good. It's not too long a time ago. But I've been doing this a long time. I joined the Troth in 2001. My first issue, actually, of Aduna was a Loki issue. There was one. So my which is really ironic in a lot of ways. There's a lovely drawing on the front of it that Diana Paxson did of Scotty laughing as Loki is being pulled with a goat, chasing with him. So anyway, so I've been, oh gosh, in the Troth. I started off just as a member. I believe in giving back. So I wanted to give back to the Troth when I got into it. So I became the Connecticut steward, sort of a networking role. Then I became the New England steward because there was a need. Then I became the High steward because there was a need. You can kind of see how this ends up going, right? Don't have needs. It's the moral. And I became a reedswoman. I was a reedswoman for a while. I was the vice steerswoman for a while. And then I was the steerswoman for a while. We use the word steer and vice steer now because we're trying to be more inclusive. But those are the words that kind of ended up coming off of my lips because that was the title that I had at the time. And now I'm a lifetime member. And I also I wrote the lore program. Went through the clergy program, so I'm a certified Troth clerk godwoman. So I've done just about everything, really. And then I wrote these books. And then I started touring and giving speeches. So anyway, I've been doing this for a long time, and I really enjoy where I'm seeing this going. And I'm really glad to be here. I know this is primarily Druids, right? Yeah. So I know I'm sort of an outsider in your midst, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Not as much of an outsider as you think. Yeah, no.
I haven't signed up.
You're not an outsider. You introduce yourself every time you come to Pagan Pride Day.
That's true. That's true. I do because I forget your face, and I don't know why that is, but I always walk up to your grove and I say, hey.
We know you.
I always forget. You're right. It's like 3 times now, isn't it? Yeah.
We know you.
Yes. I do talk to Pagan Pride Days, and I just got back from Pagan-Con last weekend. And doing this now, and I'm also a college professor. So yeah, so I do a lot of really interesting teaching. I want to sort of start this off with a question. How many of you are familiar with Freya already? Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay, so I'm going to spend time talking about some basics, but I thought it might be interesting to get into a discussion of some of that unverifiable personal gnosis stuff, you know, that actual living, breathing religion stuff. And I have a lot of my own experiences that I'll share, and we'll sort of see how that takes us. Very experimental for me because I'm usually the scholarly one, so I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work, but I think it'll be good. So Freya. So Freya. The word is a title. It means lady. Who's Freya, or Hausfrau now, is literally House Freya, house lady. The Proto-Indo-European root of her name is star P-E-R, which means first, or chief, like chief among groups, not chieftain. First, forward, first. But we don't have a living name for her. Many people have put through various theories of what her name could actually be. I don't subscribe to any of them. Mostly because those are names of deities that I think are independent deities. I don't think they're aspects of Freya. So I kind of don't live with that. What do we know about her? We know that she was a Van. She's a member of the tribe of Vanir. We know during the war with the Aesir and the Vanir, after they formed a peace, hostages were exchanged. Njord and Frey went to Asgard as hostages. Freya came along. We don't know why. We don't know how Freya got to Asgard. She just sort of shows up there, which I have some interesting theories on. We'll get back to that. Try to do some basic scholarship first. So she just sort of shows up in that exchange. Njord is her father. He is the god of the boatyard. So he's a god of the sea, but more the coastal shore. The sea where the humans interact. Where Aegir is sort of the depth. You know, Njord is sort of the sea, but he's a mercantile god. Frey is her brother, and Frey is, well, the title of the book, Frey, God of the World, by Anne Sheffield. You should all read it. Frey is her brother, and he is a Frith Lord. He's a god of kingship. He's a god of the mound. He's an Alfar god. I mean, he does a lot of things too. There's no evidence at all that these two were twins. That I have found, I should say. There's no, like, the word twin never appears with them. So a lot of people think they are twins, but the evidence kind of shows that they're not. The reason why they talk about the twins is the divine twin pair. In Indo-European studies, you see the Romulus and Remus and et cetera. You see all these twin pairs. That doesn't quite fit with Northern European stuff. It doesn't quite fit. If there was a not Proto-Indo-European, I apologize. If there was a twin pair at all, it was probably Njord and Frey. I mean, they're the two that go to the new land together. You know, so there was some evidence that it would be Njord and Frey, and then it sort of split off and branched out. It's a twist and a stretch to make it fit, to be completely honest. So my jury is out. This is one of the things about scholarship that I'm pretty sure you guys have all learned, and if you haven't learned, you'll learn it soon. There are no easy answers. There's a lot of I don't know, and you learn to live with the mystery. We're not a mystery religion, but if we were, it's because the mystery isn't solved in the lore. So she's around here. We don't know who her mother was. We don't know. It is said that Njord married his sister. So we assume that his sister is her mother. Heimskringla talks about incest, but brother-sister marriages and couplings being normal for the Vanir. So there it is. Who this mother's name is, I don't know. In my book, I actually talked about being Nerthus. And I'm not even sure about that anymore. I may have changed my mind about that. Because Njord and Nerthus, etymologically, those two words are the same. So it could be that Nerthus was just, actually it seems as though Nerthus was older, and that Njord sort of hived off and became his own deity after that. So that is sort of my questioning now, like it's not clear cut. We also only have one mention of Nerthus at all in all the lore. They talk about her idol being brought out and toured through the villages in a cart pulled by cows. It was cows. They used the word specifically, cows. In a cart pulled by cows, and she was shadowed. She was covered. No one was allowed to see her. When she got back to her island at the end of the season, her slaves would ritually bathe her and cleanse her and get her ready and put her back in her temple, and then they would be drowned. So we don't know. We don't know. So I'm not sure that Nerthus is her mother. But maybe, if you believe that Njord and Nerthus are another brother-sister pair. I'm checking my notes to make sure I stay on track because it's easy for me to go like this. Folkvang is the name of her hall in Asgard. They refer to it as the Ninth Hall, for whatever work that is. It is a hall where she hosts and feasts the warrior slain. The name of the hall means many-seated. There's also folk, meaning people, So many-seated hall, many people seated in the hall. I think it's important to note at this stage that the people that she hosts tend to be the Einrjar, the heroic dead, the battle dead, those chosen by the Valkyries from the battlefield to come up to Asgard. It is said, well, it is known that she gets half this warrior slain. That is known. It is said that she gets the first pick, and Odin gets what's left. That's due to a translation, and it's interesting because you see that it's Freya picks and Odin owns, and the rest Odin owns. That word "and" is sometimes translated as "then." So if it's Freya picks and Odin gets his, then it's "and," which to me sort of implies you, now you, now you. Yeah. I'll pick, now you pick, now you pick, sort of situation.
Like a kickball team.
Yeah, kickball team. The Arnrjar's kickball team. That might be the Ghosti-Con comment of the day. Or if it's then it's clearly first Freya, then Odin. I'm not sure which. I think it's lovely to consider, because I'm a Freya's woman, to consider that she gets the first pick. But at a scholarly level, I don't know. I really don't know. We don't know what she's got the Einrjar in her hall for. We know Valhalla, they come out and they fight on the very good plane during Ragnarok. We don't know what happens to her people. There's no record. My personal gnosis, Patty's personal opinion is what I call it. I think that they're there to hold a retreat. To protect, especially the goddesses, because the goddesses do not fight in the battle. To sort of have a defensive line by which people can get away. Because we do know that some of the gods get away. The Thor's sons. And while Balder comes back, he's already, dead by then. So that's my personal gnosis. Just to kind of slide that in there. I don't know if it's true or not. But that's my belief. It seems to make a reasonable amount of sense to me. We know that she has a number of names. She is referred to, I always forget exactly all of them because I'm terrible. She is called highest in rank next to Freyja. So she is the highest ranking deity, female deity, next to Freyja. Freyja's Odin's wife. I mean, she's got Asgard. And then Freya. So she's a very ranking lady. She appears anytime there's a list, all the gods were there, Odin and Thor and Freyja, and she's always in that list. So she's always present. So she might not be specifically mentioned in the myth, but she's always there somehow. So she's definitely a ranking lady. She is called the blot-gythja. I'll get into this a little bit further along. She is called, obviously, Freya. Who's Freya? I talked about. She's called Mardal. And we don't know what that word means. Mar means sea. Dal is probably like the ending that is Heimdall, bright, sea bright. Often how it's translated, but we really don't know. And that could be for a number of reasons. Frankly, sea bright with Njord as her father could just be an appellation meaning, the daughter of Njord, because he is of the sea, so she is the sea bright. It could link her directly to the sea. The Vanir have to do with water and swamps and oceans a lot, so it makes sense. She could be, this is rather artistic license of me, but I sometimes see, when you're looking out at the ocean or a body of water and there's that sort of path that the sun lays on the water? Mm. That's kind of in my mind how I picture the name. That sea bright, that gold, the gold road, they talk about the gold road in Fehu. So something to do with that. Syr, S-Y-R, which means sow. The Vanir are all connected to boars in one way or another. She is no exception to that. Gefn, G-E-F-N, which means gift. Horn, H-O-R-N, which refers to flax, which may have been an offering to her. I think it also, this is, again, we're sliding into Patty's personal opinion a lot very early, so we'll see how this goes. Flax was woven into cloth by women. An L of cloth was a monetary value item, much like the gold standard. Money was measured against flax, which to me speaks to the importance of women in general, in society and economically in that era, because I'm a feminist too, sorry. Not really sorry. But I think about these things. And so that's really an important thing to consider, I think, when we're talking about porn. It might have also been just that flax was offered to her as an offering. Throng, T-H-R-O-N-G, which means throng, means a group of people. So I'm not sure how that relates. It is said in a very remote source that Thor has a daughter named Throng, which again means a group of people. So I'm not sure. It's only like one source that is referenced, and it's sort of way off in the corner that it's talked about. So she's not like Bodhi and Magni, where we really know. And she could have been made up by Snorri. Snorri made a lot up. He really did. Bless Snorri for writing things down. Curse Snorri for making things up. Because there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't fit in there. So it could be a connection to Thor, we're not sure. It's just a name that we know that she went by. Menglad, M-E-N-G-L-A-D, or Menglad, meaning necklace glad, which obviously is a reference to, presumably, to her necklace. Risengamen, I pronounced it wrong, I apologize. And then there's Gullveig Hyde, and I wrote the other one down, Gefjon. Gullveig Hyde and Gefjon are three individual deities. Or not deities, they're people. Gefjon is a deity. Gullveig, meaning gold greed, came to Asgard and essentially started the Asgard-Valheim war by demanding things of the gods, and the gods decided to burn her. So they burned her up, and then she stepped out of the flame, just fine. And so they said, fine, so they burned her a second time, and then she stepped out of the flame again. And then they burned her a third time, and the same thing happened. So they finally realized that repeating the same thing over and over again is insanity, and they stopped burning her. But that was one of the precipitators of the Asur-Vanir War. Whether or not Gullveig is Freya is a matter for debate. We're not sure. I personally don't think so. The connection comes to gold. Gold is where the connection comes from. Freya is definitely associated with gold, as we'll see. Absolutely she's associated with gold. So, gold, gull, so therefore they're kind of the same. That doesn't mean anything. That's like a false analogy almost. Just because you have gold and I have gold doesn't mean we're the same, right? So there's no real evidence that. Now Hyde, H-E-I-D, comes from Voluspa, and Hyde, I height, is what the vulva calls herself. Height means I name myself. Hyde, I height. Hyde, I am named. She then says, later in the Volus book, and gifts. And so people think Hyde might be Freya, because they did have that sort of relationship. I'm a little bit closer on that. Hyde is also called a witch, which Freya is called. I think that's a little closer to being possible, although that also implies that the vulva in the grave mound is Freya, which is a whole other piece of interesting things to talk about. And then Gefjon. Gefjon, G-E-F-I-O-N, she is a deity. She actually plowed out Zealand from Denmark with her sons. She was allowed to claim as much land as she could plow in a day. So she transformed her sons into oxen and carved off this entire island. And because she's got her own myth, and because Gefjon and Gefjon sound the same but may not be the same, I really think Gefjon is sort of her own thing. I don't think she's friends with Freya, maybe, but they're not really hypotheses of Freya. I get asked these questions all the time. Is Gold thing Freya? I'm like, probably not. Is High Freya? Maybe. Harder to say. And we know that she has a falcon feather cloak that she can use to transform herself into a falcon and fly around. We know that she doesn't lunge it out lightly. In fact, it's an interesting, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but in Promiscuity, when Thor has to dress up as a bride, and before Promiscuity happens, and Idun is missing, and the gods are aging, Loki and Thor go to Freya and say, hey, can Loki borrow your cloak? And Loki says, hey, can I borrow your cloak? But she says no. No. Thor's the one who sort of talks her into it. She's like, all right. It's kind of how I read the story. All right, I'll let Loki have his cloak. So she's really very careful who she lends it out to. But that does make her a shapeshifter figure. Hildsvini is the name of a boar. It was actually Otter. O-T-T-A-R, Otter the Foolish. Otter the Foolish makes a bet with another man that his ancestry traces to Odin more closely than the other guys does. So they have this bet. So Otter goes to his float area, to his bay and his hoard, and he calls on Freya and he says, I have offered you so many things that the rock is now transformed into glass. Which to me implies blood. That he has offered her so much blood that has actually transmuted the rock. So you need to do this for me. And she says, okay, you're right. Obligation is obligation. We all understand obligation, right? Mm-hmm. All right? So I'm going to transform you into a boar, and I'm going to nightmare ride you down into the gates of the underworld, and then we'll find out. Like you do. The Lay of Hyndla is a very, very interesting piece. It's worth taking apart and really, really looking at. Which is a warning lesson. Do not ask the gods for things. In my opinion. Let us not ask them for much, and let's definitely not remind them of their obligations, because they can get mean about stuff like that. So we know that there's a boar reference. And then we've got Brizignamen. I always mess that word up, I'm apologizing. Brizignamen. Her necklace. We don't know what it looked like. Anybody's guess. We don't know if it was amber or gold or both. It is said that the dwarves forged it out of gold, which is interesting because all his Freya's women love our amber, and Freya's men love their amber too. And Freya's people all over the place are like, oh hey, this amber thing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So it's very interesting to see how that works. So there's a model, and I'll tell the story of the amber a little bit later. And we have what's called mansanger. And these were songs, love songs, that were so considered to be so offensive and disturbing to women that men who wrote them for women were arrested for indecency.
Oh, so they were basically Viking dick pics.
I'm
I like
thinking,
that.
I'm thinking of bad touch.
Bad touch.
Bad touch.
So there was some sort of a lusty love song. I consider it like a bawdy ballad. You know, we know that the medieval period was much more sexual than anybody ever let on. The Victorians really quashed that whole sex thing really well. But up until then, people were talking about it all the time. And the Vikings are no exception at all. There's all kinds of rudeness.
Oh, we're not rude at all, no.
No, I'm the saga record. It's very blunt. Very, very blunt. So, that's sort of the basics. Now we're done, right? We can go home? No, too early. So, we got another hour, which is great. So, I kind of divided up my little outline into a couple of different categories. Many of them based on the structure of my book, because it just was organized that way, and I thought it's a really great way to talk. So if you've read my book, this might look like a very familiar order, but don't worry, we'll get into new stuff as well. So love and sex. Freya's purview, love and sex. Can't take them away from each other. It's important to remember love in the Viking Age was not in any sense romantic love as we know it today. Really. I mean, I think that people loved each other. I do. I think people of all kinds loved each other throughout history. The evidence is clear. But this was a time of arranged marriages. A woman would often be called a frithweaver or a peacekeeper because she would be part of a treaty. Okay, we're not going to go to war anymore. Here, marry my daughter. Now we're family, we can't fight with each other. And women had say in the matter. It really depends on what saga you read. Usually they didn't have a whole lot of say. Usually they accepted that. So did people love each other after arranged marriages? Absolutely, that happened. You know, but Freya being, Patty's personal opinion is about to step in again. There are those who view Freya as this beautiful, she certainly is, radiating love in all the ways that love we consider romantic love. That she's a very loving deity. Yes and no, in my personal experience. She's loving in a family way, and she loves, I think she has numerous lovers, including her own brother. I think not Loki, but that's another UPG we'll talk about in a second. Because I think he's jealous. That's how I interpret Locusena. Sorry, man. That's how you translate it. But sex, absolutely. Absolutely. There's actually a song, where is it? Nope. Oh, I have it written down right here. I'll find it in a second. She has a lot of lovers. That's definitely that. Her purview is sex. If you think about sex, it's a powerful thing in many, many ways. So I think part of her power comes from, frankly, orgasm. To be blunt. Now you're going to go put this on the net. The people are going to go, oh, she used that word.
Say orgasm on the internet.
Oh my God. We know that she had a husband. He's a very shadowy figure. We don't really know much about him. His name was Odd, O-D, or O-D-R, Older. May or may not have been Odin. Because you've got that O-D in front of Odin. And it's that same root word, meaning like ecstasy, the ecstatic trance sort of ecstasy. That wild, frenzied thing.
That kind of fits with Freya though too.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Utilize the inspiration to drive it.
Yep. Yep. So it's interesting because the way that I read it is, he leaves, by the way, he leaves. We don't know why he leaves. The Victorians will tell you that he left after she had sex with 4 dwarves. That was what caused him to just, and leave. Nothing in the lore is saying that's why he left. At least nothing I can find. If you can find something, get a hold of me. Because I will revise my, look right in the camera when I said that. Because I'm willing to revise my thoughts on this entire matter if you can find that evidence. so what happened? So he just left. He left. And we know that she mourned him, and she walked all the 9 worlds looking for him and weeping tears of gold. See, there's that gold again. That gold reference. My personal gnosis, I think that she slept with the 4 dwarves in order to use her gold, her power, to transform into a powerful object. I think they transmuted it. They transmuted the gold from her tears into his necklace. My personal gnosis. So we know in Freyja though that she actually says in Freyja, like I mentioned before, that's when Thrym steals Thor's hammer. Probably because Loki told him where to find it.
There's no proof of that.
Well, we think Loki took it. Anyway, no, there's no proof of that. It's the old joke, if it's anybody's fault, it's Loki's. Sorry, Loki. But it's kind of that thing. Anyway, and Thor has to dress as Freya and go to Thrym's castle and get married. And he ends up killing all the giants there at the end. It's great. It's very hysterically funny story. It's a later story. And some people think that because it's so late, it was meant as a mockery story. I don't take it that way. I just take it as a fun, not all myths are serious and dry, you know. I take it as sort of a fun thing, but it is a very later period myth. Anyway, what she says to them when Loki and Thor show up, and the gods show up, and they're like, "Hey, Freya, we're gonna marry you off to Freya." She says, "You must think me the most sex-crazed of women if I drive off to the Jotunheim with you." And then she's so mad her necklace explodes. Imagine being that mad. Boom! Which actually shows her independence, frankly, because it's out of the ordinary. That's away from the norm. The norm in the standard would be to go and marry him. They also, the giants tend to love marrying Freya. They're always, like the giant, I want the sun, I want the moon, and I want the goddess Freya for my wife. Which also shows her importance, but I think that's also that spark of life that she is. They want the sun, they want the moon, they want life.
Also, she's supposed to be the only one that survives Ragnarok.
No, she doesn't survive Ragnarok. Actually, we don't know. Frankly, we don't know if she survives or not. What we do know is that in Heimskringla, Snorri refers to her as blot-gythja. Gythja was sort of a chieftain priest. Gythja is the feminine form of that. So priestess-ish. And after Christianity, hers was the last of the beliefs to be stamped out. So she was blot-gythja, which I think says a lot about how powerful her worship must have been, and how much I wish there were more in the record, because that would be so cool to know. It would be so cool to know. So yeah, no, she doesn't necessarily survive Ragnarok. We don't know what happens to most of the goddesses, to be honest with you. The Ragnarok doesn't mention them. So we really don't know what happens to them at all. And of course in Lokasana, she's accused of sleeping with everybody, and their brother, and her brother too, while she's at it. Yeah, and we know this happened.
That would have been a good rejoinder.
And, well, it's essentially, frankly, it's what Njord says. Because in the Lokasana, I think it's important, and I'm drifting off topic, I'm so sorry, I am like way over here, not on my outline, I'll get back to it in a second.
Stop, anything,
Oh
no.
my God. I try to be focused, much better to be focused. I think with Lokasana, it's important to look at what Loki says about the person that he's talking to. I think it's also important to look at who is defending who. Because I think that speaks very strongly to their relationships between the gods. So he says, "I know you, Freya, you know, sex-crazed woman, you've slept with there's not a person," she doesn't even say man, "not a person in this hall you have not slept with. And we all caught you and your brother having sex and you farted." Okay? And so she farted. So Njord, her father, is the one who steps up to defend her. And what he says is, that's no big deal if a woman takes a man other than her husband. Which flies in the face of a lot of the things that we know in terms of promiscuity. But it also allows promiscuity to be a thing. You know, the question is whether or not she was promiscuous. In a modern sense, maybe. In the Victorian sense, absolutely. But what is promiscuity now? You know, what promiscuity was then was, you know, sex outside of wedlock. And often that was okay as long as the person didn't get pregnant. Because then, now, you've got inheritance issues. And that's a big problem when you only have a very small island with only so many acres of land. I just lost what I was thinking. Oh, darn, hold on, let me check. Sex with inappropriate people. Oh, that's okay. That's what I wrote in my notes, sex with inappropriate people. That's sort of what promiscuity sort of meant. If you look at sort of the scholarship, it was having sex with inappropriate people. So maybe below your station, or above your station. Or incestuous. Although with Freya and Freya, as we've seen, that didn't seem to be a big deal.
I feel like I'm going to misuse a term from college. Or am I going to misuse a term? When I took Anthropology 101, they talked about ethnocentrism.
Yes.
And you have the whole Vanir versus Aesir culture, and I got the impression of, in Vanaheim, sleeping with your sibling, not a deal.
Not a deal.
Not an issue.
Nope.
So if you're anyone judging it, and anyone in the Aesir judging it, or Loki judging it, or looking at it through their own ethnocentric lens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To which I'd imagine Freya would just say, get back.
Or something. She certainly would. I do want to pause, though, and talk about sexuality a little bit, because, and this is Patty's gnosis speaking again, in terms of LGBTQIA, I don't think Freya ever once said, oh, I'm sorry, stop, not your kind. I really don't. You know, I think sex was sex, and sex is power, and sex is love, and sex is all the spark that is the life, and all the powerful things that sex is, but I honestly don't think she ever said, I'm sorry, not you. Just as a serious note for a second, you know, because I think it's really important to note that. I was actually asked once, years ago, by a person who happened to be gay, if there was a deity that he should go to for that sort of thing. And a lot of people say Frey, because he's got that giant phallus, he's definitely associated with fertility and sex himself. And a lot of people even say Loki, and for the various reasons. And I was like, well, why not Freya? Why not Freya? This is something that she does. So, you know, it's always occurred. So I'm taking a serious tone there for a second, I know that, but I think it's really important to have that out there. In my opinion, that nothing stopped her. Nothing should stop you either. So, that was all sex. And then, oh good, I'm doing right on time. We have battle and death. Freya is the death goddess. She has folkfang. The warriors go to her hall. It is said that lovers who die go to her hall. It is said that women go to her hall. In Egil's saga, Egil is grieving the death of his son, and he decides to go on a hunger strike, and he's just going to starve himself to death. His daughter Thorgerd has other plans. She doesn't want her father to die. So she goes in and she says, I will sit with you, and I will neither eat nor drink until I sup with Freya, meaning until I die. And many scholars have taken that and said, okay, well then Freya obviously has a part in death and dying. I don't know about death and dying per se, but once you're dead, she has the hall of the dead. A hall of the dead. It's, if you look into Norse archaeology and mythology and the saga record and the various other sources that you have to put together as you go along, there are multiple references of places to go where you die. Multiple afterlives. We talk about Helheim and Hel is probably the primary deity involving death and the dead, I should say, not the dying, the dead. In Norse mythology, she holds the hall for Helheim. And Helheim is pretty much where your ancestors go when they die, 9 times out of 10 anyway. That's where they go. So you're going to be meeting your family, probably, is what you can look forward to. Hope you like them. Teasing. I love my family. Most of them. So we've got that, but then we've got Ron's hall, Ron, the sea goddess. She actually collects dead sailors in her net and brings them down to her hall. We've got Folkvang, where the Einriar are welcomed and women and lovers are welcomed. We've got like the Helheim, so I think it's very interesting to note that there were multiple afterlives. That can get us into a whole talk on multiple soul parts, but that's a whole book that I'm going to write later. Or at least a chapter in a book I'm going to write later. Multiple soul parts. ADF holds to multiple soul part, more or less.
Depends on the culture.
Depends on the culture. Okay, so that at least have heard of it and know what I'm talking about.
I've heard about it from some people. Is it the fractured soul theory? Is that it?
Yeah, multiple soul theory or soul parts theory is what I call it.
Okay. I don't know how many people have talked about it. I heard about it I've only heard about it from Carrion.
Okay. All right, so I've actually talked to her about that stuff. All right, I've had conversations with her. Yeah, the idea that you have there are multiple parts to your soul, and they're sort of all kept in your lich, your body, and then when you die, they sort of disperse. So instead of being either I go to Helheim or I go to Valhalla, it might be both. And you may become a Dis or an Alf, one of the ancestral spirits, and watch over your family, and be in hell. So there's like a both and thing instead of an either or thing. For whatever that's worth. So she never actually enters battle though. We never see her fight. So she's a battle goddess and she's a death goddess, but in terms of an active war goddess, I'm not sure. I consider her a war goddess because everything else points to it. But I have to be honest, she has never actually said to be in battle with anybody. Okay? She does in, which saga is it? Sorlathatr is a saga. Well, it's a song. But the story of Hogni and Haden happens. There's Gondul. G-O-N-D-U-L? Yes, G-O-N-D-U-L, Gondul. And this is a female figure. And she has a necklace, and the necklace gets stolen by a figure that most closely resembles Loki. And then has to go to Odin. I'm sorry, man.
Everybody stares at Rob.
It's all your fault.
It's not his fault. It's Loki's fault. We already had that discussion.
Oh, Rob turns red. That's rare.
I'm sorry, man. It's just the way the mythology writes.
I
It's
know.
the way it goes.
Just don't wear necklaces around Rob, you know.
So, and basically she is told if she wants to get it back, she has to start an eternal battle between these two people. And she does. So we see her, and people really consider this myth a cognate, or this story rather, a cognate to another story where Freya has her necklace stolen by Loki, and she has to go to Odin, and Odin forces her to start a never-ending war in order to get Visinimund back. So it's a real interesting thing. So we do see her starting wars. So she's a strife stirrer. We see that. And we see her controlling, having a dead hall, having a hall of the dead. So we can definitely say that, yes, she was about this stuff. There's also, in Heimskringla, there's Skjolf, S-K-J-O-L-F. Skjolf is a female, and she's taken prisoner by her enemies, and she's captured. And she's later forced into marriage, and Agni is the man who forces her to marry him. She chokes him with her own necklace. So she's got a necklace, and he gives her a necklace right on, right? He gives her a necklace, and, you're going to marry me. And she marries him, sure, but she later strangles him. And a lot of scholars point to that as a sacrificial kingship thing.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, the hanging, especially.
I know there's a lot of UPG that Freya and the Morrigan are buddies.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of UPG saying that.
And that the whole sacrificial kingship thing is a very Morrigan job description kind of thing. And
Yeah,
I
there's
guess
certainly
they
that.
have lots to talk about over brunch.
Yeah, I would say that they do have a lot of things in common. They're covering a lot of very similar aspects and very similar stories. So, sacrificial kingship, because it was Gondul doing it, it might have been something that was done for Freya. So in addition to the sacrificial kings that we had anyway, because there were many, that often went to Odin or to Frey, we also have this one story that may show a sacrificial kingship sacrifice for Freya, which I think again points at her rank and her power as a deity. when she was receiving the big time sacrifices. They didn't just willy-nilly strangle people. It might have looked like it from the outside, but on the inside, that's totally not what they were doing. So it's really interesting to kind of think about that. And then we also have, this is troubling, and I have to clear up this misconception. Freya. One of Freya's names is Val, V-A-L, Val Freya. Val specifically means chosen slain. So you have Val father, Odin, father of the slain. Val Freya, Freya, lady of the slain. Then we've got Valkyrie, choosers of the slain. There are those who feel that Freya is the queen of the Valkyrie. I don't think so. And I'll outline my reasoning. First of all, Freya is a ranking deity. The Valkyries are not worshipped as deities. They're really not worshipped at all. Especially then, they weren't. They were actually terrifying figures then. They weren't like the Wagnerian sort of lovely on the horse riding down Valkyrie. They had their loom was the warp and weft with human intestines, and the weights on it were skulls. There's a vision in the sky. Yeah, these are not pleasant. You know, oh, the Valkyrie. I'm like, yeah, the Valkyrie. So she was a ranking deity of her own. We also know that she has folk fame. So she would be a Valkyria. She would be a lady of the slain. You know? So I don't see where Valkyrie connects to Valkyria except for that fall. And again, just because I've got gold and you've got gold doesn't mean we're the same person. So that's sort of my argument. I really don't think that she is. And then we do know, on the other hand, that she's a Dis. She's called Vanadis, Dis of Vanir. That could just be Lady of the Vanir. Another way of just saying lady. The Dis, Dis is singular, Dis here is plural, and that refers specifically to the female ancestral dead, specifically those who kind of watch over us and walk with us. So it could be that she's the Dis of the Vanir. So she may be like the progenitor of the Vanir, which is a really weird way to think about it. And I'm not sure I actually believe that I'm saying when I say that just now, to be honest. My jury is out. I'm not sure. But I do think she has that Dis thing. She's not a mother, though. Really. She has Hnoss, H-N-O-S-S, and that word translates to treasure. And there are a couple of different references to Hnoss. And then there's Gersimi, whose name also means treasure. And this is where speculation goes crazy. People think that Hnoss and Gersimi are twins, which they're not. There's no evidence of it. People think Hnoss and Gersimi are two aspects of Freya. People think that Hnoss and Gersimi are like the divine twin pair, basically. And it kind of speculates out from there. I don't know that Gersimi ever existed. I think Snorri might have made her up. Patty's personal opinion. I keep having to say that because now that I know this is going to be on the internet, I know people are going to watch it and be like, ah, she's wrong! Someone is wrong on the internet! Besides, I'm heathen and we're all wrong. Everyone
doing it
is
wrong.
doing it wrong. But you're not boss to me, so it's okay. So that's kind of, she's not really matronly. She's not a mother figure. She's not someone with the nurturing, caring, birthing the baby thing. And that kind of gets us out of Fatherland Death a little bit. So I'll kind of move into talking about her and Freyja. And then we'll talk about, magic and save. There are those who think that Freyja and Freya are one and the same deity. It's true that Freya is not really known outside of Scandinavia. It's also true that if you go into some of the myths from the continental Germanic myths of Freyja, there are certain aspects of Freyja that are much more reflective of what Freya would be normally doing in Iceland. So there's a strong argument there. I think they're separate because the Proto-Indo-European root words are different. Freyja is, go ahead.
Then you also have the continental Freya,
Yeah.
which is questionable whether it's Freya, or someone else.
Or someone else. Yeah, it's very confusing, you know. But Frigg, it's star Pri, Pri, which means to love. which her being called beloved, makes sense. For Freya, it's star P-E-R, pair. Like I said earlier, she's first, or primary. So the fact that their root words are different that far back tells me they were separate entities for a very long time. They may have been one and the same at one point, who knows? But they've been definitely divided out for a long, long time now, frankly. So I don't think they're the same. The only reference we have to Freya and fertility, or childbirth, I should say, fertility a lot. Childbirth, I should say, in Aldrin's Lament, Aldrin is helping a woman give birth who's having a difficult birth. And she puts now these runes on her nails and does some other chanting. And she says, she calls out to I wrote it down because I always forget exactly how it goes. Kind beings. She calls out kind beings. May all the kind beings help you. Frigga and Freya and all the other gods. Blah, blah. So people say, aha, Freya, mother, childbirth, yes. And I'm like, I don't know, because A, that's the only mention of her dealing with childbirth at all. And B, she's looking for a blessing. And you ask all of the kind and holy ones to bless, you just happen to name a couple. So I'm not sure that really falls out that way. I'm going to move over to magic and save because we're at 140 already. Can you believe it? Magic and save. Freya's a witch. Woo! She's a witch. Now, witch in our modern world means a lot of different things. So I'm going to speak to it in the ancient way, which was as a derogatory slur. People think, ooh, you just insulted your goddess. No, I don't think so. She's known as witch. She's called a witch. It's in the lore. But I think of it this way. Okay, you've got two villages. You've got this village here, you've got this village here. Well, this village here says they've got a witch. We have a Saith Kona, or a Volva. Our Saith Kona and Volva guides us and protects us and takes care of us. They've got a witch. So then you go over to this village and they say, we have a Volva. She's a Saith Kona. She does all these wonderful things to protect and guide us and harm our enemies. And they have a witch. So it's very much in how you look at it. Save, some of you saw last night. I won't talk about that specific session because it's over now and it's closed. But it's some sort of a trance practice. We don't know. All right, so Eric the Red Saga talks about a Volva who comes to a farm. And she says that she will see for the people. The first thing that she needs to do is eat the hearts of every animal present on the farm. So she has, sheep heart, I'm sure, goat heart, whatever. She eats the hearts of every animal on the farm. And then she says she gets to ascend a high seat, which they set up for her, some platforms, goose feather pillow, very specific. And she says someone needs to sing the songs for me. Is there anyone who knows the songs? The Ward songs. Nobody does. Except one woman who is now very Christian, and it's like, I don't know, this is a bad idea. I'm with God now, and I feel it would be a conflict. And the Volva assures her, no, it won't be, no, it won't be, no, it won't be. So she sings the songs. The Volva says, I can see all the spirits with me now, and proceeds to answer questions, prophesy from her seat, and tell stories and do all these things. That's what the biggest picture we have of Seth. Most complete picture. There are mentions of Seth working all over the lore. But that's the biggest, most central picture that we have. We have things like one Volva called a bunch of fish into a bay to feed the people because people were starving. We have cursing. They did a lot of cursing. We have one transformed into a whale, I believe it was, to go chasing after her enemy. One who, or sent, I'm sorry, she sent, I beg your pardon, she sent the whale. Here, whale, go kill them. We have...
we're getting a killer whale for that.
Right? Well, northern
Those blue whales are just too damn sad about it. You gotta be sure it's the right whale.
Oh. That was
Well, now you're just getting that hang.
There's a whale of a tail.
Just.
This is why you have no friends, Dan.
Reported for posterity. Now we know the truth.
And you're his wife.
Well, anyway, so we have notice of these things. We have a lot of stealing another person's luck. Because luck is a very important thing for Norse culture. It was actually sort of like a store of luck that you would build up and you would have, and some people had better luck than others, and that impacted your reputation, impacted your actions and their success, and all kinds of stuff like that. So people would steal luck. I imagine the opposite would occur too, that they could strengthen luck. So they did a lot. It wasn't just prophecy. The prophetic stuff is most of the time referred to as spow, S-P-A with the accent, or spay, S-P-A-E, it's pronounced spow. But they call it spay in the modern world. So that piece of it is what you see in a lot of the oracular settings that like Diana Paxton, myself, Rob, other people I know are out doing. But there's a lot more to it than that, and Freya has purview over all of it. So she's always one to call on for magical workings, if you want to do that sort of thing. Interestingly enough, and this is the subject of a chapter of a book I might be writing, maybe, in all my spare time. The garb that the Volva is wearing in Eric the Red saga is actually Finnish. She's dressed as a Finn. And I'm sorry, I know that's a racial slur. That's the word that they use then. So I apologize for using it, but it's the first one that comes to mind because that's what the word is in the lore. So again, my apologies.
So does that point to connections with shamanism?
Maybe? Maybe not? There's all kinds of record of, and I can't, the Sami, you know, of Queen Gunlaug, there are all kinds of records of people going out and learning magic from, again, they would use the word Finn, but the Sami from, yeah. And their migration tracks in their routes with the reindeer definitely crossed into all of Scandinavia, except Iceland because it's an island, you know. So were they encountered? Yes. Were they sharing space? Yes. Were they learning from each other? Probably. So it's interesting. I have a whole subject of speculation about that coming out, but you'll have to wait until I actually get that written down. But it's interesting to know. Anyway. So in shape-shifting, and then it's important to know, lastly about this, that she taught Seth to Odin. That's how he knows it. She taught it to him.
I'm sorry, she taught who?
Odin. That's why we call on Odin for Seth. Or many of us do. Anyway, not everybody does. Many of us do. I know one Seth Kona who chants runes 3 times and sits at the feet of Hel. Just frightening. Really good. Frightening. Because it's just the power is overwhelming. But she doesn't invoke Freya or Odin. Really not much at all. So it all depends on the Seth worker. I had a thing I was going to say and I just completely lost it again. Oh man, I'm so sorry. Let me check my notes. Oh, that's what it was. In fact, we find that there were more men practicing Seth than women. Which is kind of a throw it on its head from what our current modern belief is, that men can't do it. It looks like men did it in groups.
Because we're 12.
You people! I don't even know. But there are records of a house full or a hall full of men all in the Seth trance doing magic work, and then they were usually burned to death as a result. So it seems as though like there was a sort of solitary practice, but then there was this sort of group magic methodology as well, which is, I want to know more, but there's not a lot written. So I'm not sure how I'm going to get that information.
Don't forget what Odin's called because he does Seth work.
Right? Right. So it's interesting. Interesting stuff. All right, any wrapping up? I think I got that. We already talked about Brazilian. I have my summing up stuff to make sure that I get everything in here. Oh, Húsdrápa. I was going to say with the Amber connection with Freya, it's very interesting. There's a Húsdrápa is the story of Loki stealing Freya's necklace, Because he does. He transforms into a fly and bites her until she rolls over so he can unclasp the thing. He runs off with it. And he transforms himself into a seal and walks off into the ocean. Well, Heimdall sees all this happen, and he transforms himself into a seal, and he flights out after Loki. What it's called is Hrafnir, which means harbor kidney. So what the heck is a harbor kidney? No one knows. But if you've ever been to the Baltics, or even, I think the Chesapeake too, or some of the other amber sites that are popular around the world, it kind of comes up out of the water.
Washes up on the shore.
It washes up on the shore. It's just this chunk of stuff. I know a person who has one that's the size of a loaf of bread, like a round bread. I covet. I admit it. I told him to. I'm like, don't you ever get rid of that without talking to me first, because I need that. So they kind of think of harbor kidney. It might be this sort of amber chunk, which might relate Freya's necklace to amber, or her tears being amber tears along the shore. Like these are Freya's tears. Again, no proof one way or the other. So it's hard to say for sure. But there is that story. And I forgot to tell you that. So I was talking about for a second. Questions? I did good. Yeah.
There's a lot about necklaces,
Mhm.
not just Freya's, but other people. There's necklace rings. And, is that just because from grave sites the Norse wore a lot of necklaces and they were common things, or is there something else going on there?
Yes and yes. To be frank, many grave sites for Norse women, especially ranking Norse women, had like glass beads, especially because glass beads were rare. So having a glass bead was a sign of wealth. So it wasn't all just. I love to drip amber. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't all just dripping amber. It was necklace, glass beads and stuff like that too. And then, so yes, in grave sites you find that all the time. Although they were often necklaces or even hung from torques, hung from turtle brooches, depending on which time period you're looking at. So but there's also, if you look at mother goddess imagery, or more specifically earth goddess imagery, there's often a necklace being worn, or a belt, a girdle of some sort. There are those who say for Sigmund it's a girdle. I don't believe them. I think it's a necklace, but mostly because it's called a necklace. It's not called a girdle, so why would it be? Anyway, but it does possibly link her to an earlier form of like maybe an earth goddess, not necessarily a mother goddess, but like an earth, in the traditional sense of an earth goddess.